Hey there! I thought what we would do today was just talk about pens. I'm not going to do a writing sample. What I thought we would do today is talk about something that's been on my mind a lot because I've been experimenting with this quite a bit lately. And I think it's on other people's minds as well because I kind of alluded to this in one, I think, Consult the Doctor video, or maybe it was the greatest of all time. It doesn't matter. People picked up on that comment, and that comment was about putting a different nib on a pen. So the reason I wanted to bring it up is that I've been experimenting with it recently and I have really enjoyed it. So that's why I thought I would share this. So what I'm really doing today is not reviewing pens, not really showing you how pens write, but it's talk through a thought process. And I found that, for whatever reason, people sometimes like it when I just talk about things and don't just review yet another pen. So here we go. The topic is switching nibs on a pen. And it turns out that you can switch nibs on certain pens. The end, I'll see, no. What I mean by that is, imagine that you have a pen that you really like, but it doesn't write exactly the way you would like it to write. Well, the simplest option is go to a Nibmeister. There are many. I've done a video called On Nibmeisters where I list a couple. By no means an exhaustive list. There are more and more Nibmeisters every day, it seems. I see a lot of pictures from pen shows where there's people I've never heard of who do Nibmeister work. If you're not familiar with the concept of a Nibmeister, that is someone who understands nib geometry and function very well, and they can either tune a nib for you, so make it wetter or drier, make it smoother, give it a little bit more feedback, make it flow better. Or they can actually regrind a nib. For example, take a broad nib that was round and turn it into something italic, so you get more line variation. Some Nibmeisters, most Nibmeisters I think, also add, well, maybe I shouldn't say most. There are Nibmeisters who add flex to nibs to make them softer so that you get more line variation. But what if that's not the thing for you? What if you don't want to send out a nib like that, or it's not worth it to you, or you just don't want to do that for a variety of reasons? Well, then there are other options. My favorite option is to then try to put another nib on that pen. And there are different ways to do that. First of all, we have to understand that there are two kinds of nibs. There are stock nibs, and then there are nibs that are manufactured in-house. A good example of a company that manufactures nibs in-house is Aurora from Italy. There are other companies that do this as well. I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list here because it would take a long time, and you can very easily Google this. There will be threads in the Fountain Pen Network or whatever. People will tell you whether the nib on your pen was made in-house or was the stock nib. If you have an in-house nib, you can purchase other nibs typically. Aurora does sell nib units, and they're very easy to exchange. You just unscrew the unit, take it out of your pen, and screw in another nib unit. Very simple for most of their pens. There are other pens like their Ypsilon where that doesn't work so well. But I digress. If you have, say, an Aurora 88, very common model, you can easily do that. So that's great. The difficulty is you need to stick to the nib of that company. You cannot just put a Visconti nib on an Aurora pen. It doesn't work. Now, there is a website, I want to say it's fpnibs.com, but forgive me if I'm wrong. They sell casings, so they sell nib collars that you can use to put, say, I think a Bock nib on a Sailor pen. Sailor is another company that makes their nibs in-house. So they don't have collars to convert anything into anything else, but they do have certain options which are quite cool. So you could look into that. But then there are stock nibs. And it turns out that we live in a day and age where a lot of fountain pen companies don't make their own nibs. I'm going to use the Edison Pen Company as an example, just because I know Brian Gray and I don't think he will be offended when I say this. But by all means, send the video to Brian, tell him to get angry, and I'll look forward to the email. Thanks, Brian. Now, the Edison Pen Company Sorry, I then had Anderson, Bryan, Goulet. I had too many Bryans. So, Edison Pen Company uses Jowo nibs. They're Jowo nibs. And recently, they've started to use these nibs, which are made by Magna Carta in India. They're number 8 nibs with an ebonite feed. Very nice nibs, I find. But the advantage of that is, if you have an Edison with a number 6 nib, that's a Jowo nib. There really are two big companies that make nibs, Jowo and B.R.E, and then there is Schmidt, and I always thought that was his own company, but I think at some point someone told me Schmidt is a subsidiary of B.R.E. If I'm wrong, and you know, then please correct me, because I like to learn these things. In any case, both B.R.E and Jowo are in Germany. They've been making nibs for a long time, and they're so good at it that a lot of companies, instead of making their own nibs, say, you know what, B.R.E, send me 5,000 380 nib units, and I'll put them on my pen. The advantage of that is that there's a really good chance that if you've purchased a pen, it's either a Jowo or a B.R.E nib. How do you know? Well, you can find all that information online. I don't want to waste your time talking you through it. The feed shapes are a little different, and I don't, here I have, this is my pen. This is an S.B.R.E. Brown pen, okay, made by Leonardo. This is a Jowo nib. It's a number 6 Jowo nib. Sorry, it had trouble focusing because my face was partially there. This feed size, feed shape, this shape is a typical Jowo feed shape. So if you see that, then you know that's the Jowo nib. You can unscrew the nib, the whole unit, collar, feed, nib. You can put another number 6 Jowo nib. Here I have an example of what I want to talk about today. This is a classic pens pen. This is an older style B.R.E feed. The newer ones can be a little flatter, but this sort of round design, that is a B.R.E nib. And then I thought to myself, on this classic pen, this is an LM1, a pen I really like, but it has a nib on it that was ground into an architect nib. That's a very specific type of nib. That's not always good for everyday writing. I thought to myself, I think that the old style Visconti nibs were made by B.R.E as well. This pen came with a B.R.E stock nib. So I seem to recall that Visconti had their nibs made by B.R.E. I don't know if they still do, but they used to. I have an older style Visconti nib. Here it is, from the first fancy pen I ever bought, a Visconti Opera Elements. I thought, you know what, I'm going to carefully pull that nib out. Of course, you have to be very careful. You don't want to break the feed. You don't want to bend the nib out of shape. But if you've done that a couple times, it becomes pretty easy. And I put that Visconti nib on this pen, and it fits pretty well. It couldn't fit the Visconti feed, so I used the feed that came with the particular nib unit, and I put the Visconti nib on. And now I have this pen, which is a pen that I really love. I love that material, but with a nib that's more suited for everyday writing. And actually that particular Visconti nib is a very pleasant nib. Sorry for getting very close. I had to put that on my desk. A nib that I really like a lot. So what I have done now, without investing any money, I've not gone to a nib mice, I've not done any of that. I've taken a nib that I already owned and I've put it on a different pen. And what I would encourage you to do is try that out. If you have a particular pen that you like for me, for that red pen, I love that pen. The nib is great. It was nib miced by Salmon from Toronto Pen Company. Lovely, lovely nib. That's not the issue. It's just not an everyday writing nib for me. But now that pen can be used in everyday writing applications. Or sessions, I guess I was trying to say. At work, no problem. No longer get the super wide line. So what I'm trying to say is, try that out. Really good probability your pen is either B.R.E or Jowo. If you're not sure, you can ask questions online. I don't always have time to answer those questions in comments and videos. Go on the Fountain Pen Network, show people your pen if you're not sure, and say, can you tell me if this is a B.R.E or a Jowo nib? And I bet you, 100% of the time, someone's going to come up and say, oh, that's B.R.E. They can get another B.R.E nib. Good chance you already have another B.R.E or Jowo nib, but even if you only own one pen, you can purchase nibs online. fpnibs.com is just one option. I'm not affiliated with them, but they sell a lot of different kinds of nibs, B.R.E and Jowo, different sizes, number 6, number 8. For B.R.E, Jowo doesn't do the number 8 anymore. Do that. Then you are, of course, spending some money. If you buy a new nib, obviously you're spending some money. But if you can switch out something with something else that you already own, it doesn't cost you anything except for a little bit of labor trying to make things fit. Don't force anything. Take it easy. But you can really improve your writing quality. You can improve that pen. And I've done this a couple times. I've put a I've had Wacko Jacko, the local nibmeister in Calgary, to put a Danny Trio nib on my Conid. Conid King Size bulk filler. Works beautifully now. Now I have a great pen with a fantastic nib. And it's completely changed the experience of that particular pen to me. And that's what I'm trying to get at. You can work with what you have, or maybe purchase something that will cost you a little bit of money, especially if it's a gold nib, but you can revolutionize the way that pen works in a straightforward way. Doesn't mean you have to buy a new pen. To me, that now functions as a new pen, whether it's that Conid or whether it is that classic pen's red pen I've just shown you. You change the way the pens function, and that's really cool. So, as I said, this was just a video where I wanted to talk you through that thought process. Bock, Jowo, stock nib, experiment, fiddle with that. Buying a whole new nib unit, especially when it's one that's made in-house, can be as expensive as buying a new pen. Some of them are really, I'm just going to be honest, overpriced in my mind. If you buy a gold nib from some of these companies that make their nibs in-house, and not all of them sell them, Montblanc will not sell parts to the public, but for example Aurora will. You may have to go through a pen shop who can order it for you, but they do offer that. Some of these nibs are like $300, $400 for just the nib unit. Well, in that case, you might be better off purchasing another pen. But still, there are many options, especially if you go for steel nibs, where a nib may set you back $50. Sometimes less than that. And there are companies, I think Goulet does it, at least they used to do it, Anderson Pens does it, or at least used to do it. They have their own branded nibs. Try those. Those are probably just Jowo nibs that they had their logos stamped on. That's fine. Easy way to try out different nibs. So that's another thing. If you have a fine nib and you think, you know what, I got this, let's say, Jowo nib pen from Edison. I got it with a fine nib. I wonder if broad nibs are for me. Buy one of those aftermarket Jowo broad nibs instead of buying a whole new pen. Especially if you buy it in steel, it'll be cheaper and you get to experiment. You can have the full lineup, extra fine, fine, medium, broad, sometimes even double broad or italics. Experiment with all those and it will cost you less than a new pen. I just wanted to point that out because I think people don't always realize this, and be careful, be gentle, don't break anything on your pens. Be aware, it won't always work. It won't always work. As I said, with Bock, you have different kinds of feeds, so you may have to experiment, but that's part of the fun. Experiment, see what happens, and remember, you can also buy aftermarket feeds, again on fpnibs.com. Really, it sounds at this point like they sponsor the video. I have no personal contact with the people who run their website. I just know that they sell a lot of this kind of stuff. And there are other websites that do so as well. Google it, find out. I hope this thought process was useful. I hope I haven't bored you to death. For me, it's added a lot of value to some of my pens that I find much more pleasant to use now than I did when I got them with the nibs they came with. That's why I wanted to do this video. Let me know what you think about switching around nibs and such. And I'll catch you again next time, probably for another pen review. Bye!